Hey YouTube, it's Evan Magician 34, and it's time for Ladies Night once again, and I've got a really cool girl-themed deck, and this one a lot of people wouldn't think of. This is ice monsters, not ice barrier monsters or anything like that. This is actually ice monsters like Ice Master and Ice Queen, and I'm even including Cold Enchanter just because she fits that theme. So anyway, here's the deck. It's a good casual deck. It could perform well at locals. With some work and maybe a few changes, who knows? I mean, this is a fun deck. It's mostly for fun, but it has some really competitive potential and revolves around some of the game's least appreciated but surprisingly effective cards. Okay, and yes, the deck does use 6 secret rares as its core, which some people might say, wow, that's a lot of money. But really, these are very inexpensive secret rares because nobody really wants them. So actually, you can get them pretty cheap. And to demonstrate that, 3 copies of Ice Master. She's pretty inexpensive because no deck really uses her. She's basically just a card most people pick up for looks. I've got 5 just for grins right now, so yeah, she's quite easy to pick up. You are going to run 3 of her. She's an 8-star. That's relevant. And we're also running 3 copies of Ice Queen. Another 8-star water monster. Both of those are spellcasters as well. Okay, and they're pretty much the biggest things in the deck, too. We're running 2 copies of Cold Enchanter, basically because she puts ice counters on stuff, which is what's most important. And also, when she can also discards things from your hand to activate her effect. And also it makes her a 1900-point stick, essentially, whenever she puts a counter on somebody, and then you can promote to Ice Master later and kill something. So it's a fun, decent beat stick, but it's mainly in here actually because it's a 4-star spellcaster that's also a water attribute. So she fits the bill very well. And next, another fine lady for this deck, 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva. They can recruit each other, and you can like sync one diva to whatever the other monster is, and then sync the other diva to the synchro monster if you need to. But also, Diva goes and gets any other monster from your deck that's going to be water, obviously, since it's a Sea Serpent, and that's an instant Ice Master on your field. So, that's one way to go. We're running 1 copy of Spine Gillman, just so that you can use Diva to tag for him to make an instant 5-star if you need to. Or 6 with Treeborn Frog, who is in this deck. So, basically just synchro fodder there. We're also running 1 copy of Reese the Ice Mistress. Basically because she gets searched by Diva, but she's also a 2-star tuner that can actually survive some combat while still being a water attribute. So she fits a lot of the stuff in the deck, and she's fun. I mean, she's not completely indestructible in battle, but she doesn't die to most of the things that are actually going to come across and attack her. So that's what's important about her. She can buy you a turn, usually. We're running 1 copy of Fishborg Blaster. Virtually everything in the deck is water except the synchros. So this guy plays well with the deck, and there are plenty of things you want to discard from your hand, actually, to get stuff going. So he's quite good. He's the recurring tuner. Nothing not to like about that. 2 copies of Treeborn Frog, just to get him into the grave without flooding yourself. So yeah, good way to go. Needless to say, Treeborn Frog helps facilitate the blaster. And last, we're running another water spellcaster with a low level, Crystal Seer. We do run Rabuku in the deck, so we can float her into other cool stuff. She digs through your deck to get cards, which this deck does like to get cards and kind of needs them to keep going. So she fits the deck very well. Spellcasters are important because of Ice Queen, obviously. So, and that's your monster base. Monster Reborn. Mind Control, obviously, we got plenty of tuners to use with that. Dark Hole. 2 copies of MST, because we don't want those pesky back rows getting in the way. Swords of Revealing Light. Obviously, because of Cold Enchanter, we can sync for Duloran, and this is a great card to bounce back with Duloran, plus buying yourself a couple of turns in case you get a slow start. All good reasons to run swords. But of course, up until now, this deck looked pretty slow. You'd be thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm basically going to stall for a couple of turns and then get run over. Well, this deck actually has lots of insurance against that. One of them is 3 copies of Trade-In, which is why we're running 3 copies of Ice Master and 3 copies of Ice Queen, because we like to feed them to Trade-In. Ice Queen you can't get out of the grave, but she's a spellcaster for other Ice Queens to count up to make 3. Plus, Ice Master can very much be reanimated from the grave. So, good Trade-In stuff. Card Destruction, because there's plenty of stuff you don't mind sending to the grave, it's not a big deal. We're also running a full complement of 3 hand destructions. A lot of it is, obviously you're not going to get your card destruction and your 3 hand destructions and so on. So you're running this many copies of everything to make sure that you hit them fairly reliably, 1 or 2 copies in your opening hand. That's kind of the idea. Well, opening hand counting what you draw from the first card that says draw cards, obviously. Anyway, we're running 2 copies of Moray of Greed. Like if you get Spine Gilman in your hand, you obviously want to put that one back. A second copy of Frog is good fodder to put back. Extra copies of Diva, all this stuff is good things to feed back into your deck. Too many copies of the 8-star monsters, feed them back into your deck to redraw with Moray of Greed. We're also running just 1 copy of Salvage. We'd be running more, but remember, Salvage only gets things that are 1500 or less, and a number of our monsters that actually fit that description are things we want to have stay in the grave. So Salvage is basically just to fuel up cards like Hand Destruction and Moray, and really more than 1 is excessive, so it's comfortable at 1. We also run Torrential Tribute, and 2 copies of Bottomless. Obviously, kind of need to defend ourselves a little bit. And last but not least, we are running 3 copies of Wabaku. It's a good time buyer and plays well with Crystal Seer, like I said before. Okay. And it should be obvious by now that the extra deck is probably one of the most critical features of this deck, because most of your power is coming either from your 8-star guys, or well, ladies, excuse me, and pretty much all the rest of it comes from your synchro deck. And a lot of it's on the lower level synchros, but we're going to go ahead and go through by biggest number to smallest number, because that's just how I usually do it. We're going to run 1 copy of Mistworm, because you can definitely sync this up. Your 8-stars don't really sync in this deck, because Mistworm is 1 plus 2 or more monsters. So you're not going to get Mistworm that way, but a little reanimation or stealing from your opponent or a well-played Diva can definitely equal a Mistworm. So keep them in mind. 1 copy of Stardust Dragon, because we're not going to be syncing for 8 very many times. Scrap Dragon. Colossal Fighter. We're basically just getting kind of the key targets for this deck and how it plays. Thought Ruler. He actually has some interesting applications in the new format, so I felt like he was worthy of inclusion. Black Rose Dragon. And Scrap Arcfiend. I'm running this guy over Urbellum, because I think more times than not you're going to want the damage over the effect, which Urbellum not always going to be that effective in this deck, because you don't sync for 7 very often and it may take you a while to reach it. So his effect is not as likely to go off as Arcfiend's just sheer power is liable to be useful. So that's why we're going Arcfiend over Urbellum. Alright, now to the 6-stars. Goyo, Rhinac, Duloran, Guionite. We're running him just to have 1 more 6-star, and this is pretty much the best 6-star beat stick behind what we've already got, Goyo and Duloran. So this guy's the next good option. Duloran's not always the best thing. So for when he's not the best choice because you don't want to bounce stuff for whatever reason, Guionite's a good second. Or if you're just using him as a way to sync up to something bigger. Guionite's a great guy to just sync out to get rid of and go do something else. We're also running Tempest, basically because Cold Enchanter is a spellcaster, and this can be a good way to finish people off with damage, needless to say. Magical Android, because you can definitely sync for 5, and I like Justice Cataster, your 2 basic 5-star options still. Because obviously no Earth monsters in the deck, so we can't use Naturia Beast. And last but not least, we're also running Armory Arm, because he's a definite option in this deck with so many small monsters. Alright, and there you go. And that's the deck. It's the Ice deck for Ladies' Night. And until next time, rate, comment, subscribe, and enjoy.